Acting Speaker, I rise to speak on the Estate Agents, Residential Tenancies and Other Acts Amendment Funding Bill of 2024. This is a bill that contains a number of reforms across a number of consumer affair portfolio and policy areas, including housing and rental reform, sex worker regulation amendments as they concern the Sex Work Regulation Fund, and reforms around modernising the way in which we continue to engage with consumers, advocacy groups and industry through the Estate Agents Act of 1980 and the Public Records Act of 1973. Acting Speaker, as a government, we're absolutely committed to help make Victoria a better and fairer place to live, learn, work, raise a family and to retire in, and access to housing is fundamental to all of this. That's why we have invested $5.3 billion to deliver the big housing build program. In September 23, we released the pioneering Victorian Housing Statement with a target to build 800,000 new homes over the next decade. And more recently, we kicked off the community consultation on a new plan for Victoria. But as we know, Acting Speaker, that as demand for housing has increased, we've also seen more Victorians needing to rent in order to access housing, with more Victorians renting now than ever before. As outlined by the 2021 ABS census, almost 30% of private dwellings across Victoria are occupied by renters. That's 681,419 dwellings. And according to the Commissioner for Residential Tenancies Renting in Victoria report, of the people renting across Victoria, 89.7% are in private residential properties, rental properties, 1.3 million people that is, and over 11% are in public housing or community housing, that's over 155,300 people. 8 of the 10 local government areas, top local government areas with the highest concentration of renters were situated across inner Melbourne, including in my own community of Marybeck, where we have 36.1% of renters. As set out by the 2021 ABS census, over 25,980 local dwellings in Marybeck are occupied by renters, equating to 38.3% of local homes, which is significantly higher than the Australian average of 30.6% and indeed higher than the Victorian average of 28.5% of total homes that were rented across the time of the 21 census. And as we know, Acting Speaker, that the most significant driver of housing and rental affordability is housing supply. That's why we're pursuing the bold housing reforms via the Big Build and the Housing Statement and Plan Victoria, which I just touched on, but it's also why we're continuing to drive the legislative reform that's necessary to keep renting fair for renters, including through this bill. It's a bill that builds on what are already the strongest rental protections in the country. 134 reforms that we've previously introduced to make renting even fairer, via restricting rental increases between successive fixed-term rental agreements, banned all types of rental bidding. We've introduced a portable rental bond scheme to lower the cost of moving for renters. We've extended notices of rent increases and notices to vacate periods to 90 days. We've introduced mandatory training and licensing for real estate agents. We've made rental applications fairer and easier. We've delivered a rental stress support package of $2 million. We've established the Rental Dispute Resolution Victoria through this bill, which will activate to assist renters and residential rental providers by providing an alternative to VCAT for resolutions of disputes over rent, damages, repairs and bonds. Because we know, Acting Speaker, that with more people in Victoria renting than ever before, it is inevitable that the number of rental disputes will increase. And this will be a service that is faster and fairer and cheaper, and it's going to be a way to resolve a range of rental disputes that will enable VCAT to use its resources to address more complex matters, such as disputes around termination of residential rental agreements, applications for an order of possession or rented premises. The amendments in this bill will be the first step in supporting the delivery of the government's housing statement by expanding the property fund and the residential tenancy fund to facilitate the cost to be facilitated through to support this dispute resolution process, and will include funding to support financial counselling services to assist renters. And in this context, I would like to pay tribute to a couple in my community, the Northern Community Legal Centre, which is based on Pascoe Road in Broadmeadows and supports a number of disadvantaged and marginalised communities across the north, with 52% of its client base being born outside of Australia. And they do quite a bit when it comes to providing these clients with support for residential tenancy, bond payments, refunds, dispute, lease cessations, tenant compensation, notices to vacate, rental increase issues and rental repair issues. And I'd like to pay tribute to the CEO, Jenny Smith, and her entire team, and I commend the board, whom I acknowledge, including Nicole King, the Chair, Justin Barbour, Angela Ballett, and the many, many others involved there. I'd also like to acknowledge the Community Information Support Service in Marybeck, who do a fantastic job too. The bill also contains amendments relating to the Sex Work Regulation Fund and continues to complement the decriminalisation of sex work, which took effect of the 1st December 23. The bill will close the Sex Work Regulation Fund, which was established as a trust account to support the operation of that previous sex work licensing and registration scheme. And Acting Speaker, this is a world away from how sex workers were previously treated in a time gone by, which I'll touch on shortly in the context of the changes to the Public Records Act of 1973. Established under the Public Records Act of 1973, the Public Records Office of Victoria is the archive of the state and local governments in Victoria, holding around 100 kilometres of hard copy records and 600,000 digital records dating all the way back to 1836 to the present day. All of the staff and volunteers at PROV do an outstanding job to preserve the records of enduring value from the past for future generations. On Thursday, the 25th of May 2023, I had the absolute pleasure to represent the former Minister for Government Services at the 2023 Sir Rupert Hamer Record Management Awards at the Public Records Office in North Melbourne, attended by a number of distinguished guests, including former Speaker Judy Maddigan, who's the President of the Public Records Advisory Council, Justine Heazlewood, who's the Keeper of the Public Records in Victoria, Sven Bluemmel, the Victorian Information Commissioner, Professor Maggie Walter from the Yoorrook Justice Commission, and former Premier Jeff Kennett, who's a patron. The award celebrated public sector record keepers for their innovation and collaboration with PROV in identifying, preserving and accessing public records. The ceremony recognised a number of organisations for their outstanding record-keeping efforts, including the University of Melbourne, the Department of Justice, Cardinia Shire Council, the Department of Education and Monash Health for the transfer of the Queen Victoria Hospital records and the ongoing preservation of records of women's health across Victoria of the 19th and 20th centuries. And Acting Speaker, as stated in the Minister's second reading speech, a decision was made last year to introduce a more flexible consultative pathway for the Public Records Office of Victoria. This decision was in recognition of the complex policy challenge that increasingly interface with public record management, and this includes the protection of digital assets and data management, particularly as increasingly there are cybersecurity risks and records move from physical to digital assets. A new consultative arrangement will enable PROV to more broadly engage stakeholders and be designed around future challenges and importance of record keeping. The Minister, I understand, has met with the President of PRAC, Judy Maddigan, to discuss stakeholder concerns and alternative models and bodies. I've also had several conversations and been approached by several stakeholders, all of whom their views I have conveyed to the Minister and her office. All PRAC members, I understand, have been invited to extend their terms until the 30th of June and will be consulted along with other stakeholders on alternative methods, which I look forward to also engaging with my very interested community, including the Coburg Historical Society. Because, Acting Speaker, preserving and drawing on our history, both good and bad, is an essential part of understanding our past, where we've come from and where we're going. In this respect, Speaker, I would, given the bill also contains elements that pertain to sex work decriminalisation, I thought it would be timely to share some of the historic records of PROV and their recently digitised catalogue that was made public as they relate to female prisoners in Victoria from 1934 to 1948, to just reflect on how far we've come as a state on these issues. Victorian female prisoners number 7781 and 8051 include many who were in that era charged with prostitution, for loitering for prostitution or being considered to have insufficient means, including vagrancy and homelessness. Going through the records, it is clear that the records do demonstrate the criminalisation of poverty, which disproportionately impacted a cohort of women who at the time were trying to survive to feed themselves and their families. Behind each charge sheet is only part of a story of a woman who was a whole person, and that was more than the sums of their crimes or their class at the time. Given Pentridge Prison's women's section in my electorate did open originally in 1933 with the women held under the charge of matrons, many of the women contained in these records went through Pentridge to be assessed, classified and held. Some of these women, who I'm sure never probably imagined Victoria would one day decriminalise the very work for which they were charged for in the 1930s and 1940s, let alone imagine that they would be named in Hansard, included Faye Allen in 1939, who was charged with loitering for prostitution and sentenced to 14 days imprisonment or a £5 fine. Mary O'Dowd was charged with loitering for prostitution in 1934 and sentenced to 14 days imprisonment or a £2 fine. Gloria Cunningham was charged with loitering for prostitution in 1940 and sentenced to 7 days imprisonment with a £3 fine. Muriel Ward Marr was charged with loitering for prostitution in 1934 and sentenced to 14 days imprisonment or a £2 fine. And Olga Wilson was charged with prostitution in 1936 and sentenced to 1 month imprisonment or a £5 fine. Acting Speaker, fast forward to today in 2024 and Victoria has now decriminalised, as we know, sex work, ensuring that sex workers today have the same protection and recognition as the many other workers in this state. But it's these records preserved by the PROV that allow us and future generations to continue delving back into times and areas that for various reasons treated different cohorts of people very differently based on their ethnicity, their gender or even their occupations, even those who were the most marginalised and disadvantaged in our community. But I also pay tribute to the great team of tour guides at the National Heritage Trust who run the incredible daily tours across the whole of the Pentridge precinct, including the many women who were processed, remanded or held there, with every team member there in Coburg very proud of their work and telling the story of Coburg really for the first time to the rest of the country and the world. Speaker, in that context, I commend the bill to the House. It's all about supporting our landmark housing statement. It's all about finalising the decriminalisation of sex work and changes to the Public Records Act. I thank you for the opportunity.
Member for